Bhaskar Sunkara is the founding editor and publisher of Jacobin, as well as a columnist for The Guardian and the author of the Socialist Manifesto, The Case for Radical Politics in an Era of Extreme Inequality. He's also the publisher of Catalyst, a journal of theory and strategy, and London's Tribune. Okay, I don't know how you have any time in the day to do anything, but welcome to the show, Bhaskar, and congratulations.
I don't sleep. Yeah.
I mean, I feel like I'm like that, and this is, you dwarf me.
Well, I just started drinking coffee for the first time like a few months ago, so I've been holding that as my, and I feel like it had really good effects for 2 months, and now it's all like, I'm back to normal, but now I need the coffee. So Anyway, it works out well. Yeah. I started drinking coffee early in my adulthood, late in life, I guess. When I was traveling, because I was having horrible jet lag. And now I'm at the stage where it's like, if I don't have a nitro in the morning, which is pretty much, a level of drug at this, I mean, it's intense. I am not a human. You don't want to be in my presence. Like, I have this like silence. But yeah, it takes a lot of focus to be able to do all this work. So congratulations, Jacobin, 10 years, very important years. But when you launched, obviously this was pre-Bernie, pre-DSA's, blowing up of DSA. Can you tell us a little bit about the story of Jacobin's founding? Yeah, I guess I had been a socialist from my teenage years, and to describe my socialism, it was a combination of a respect for the welfare state and what it could do for people's lives day to day, but also a belief that the welfare state wasn't enough, and an interest in the Marxist framework and in a lot of more radical socialist history. And I think we kind of need both balancing acts. Like, I think it's not enough to just be for a welfare state when we've seen the way in which reforms can be so easily undermined. And we see what capitalists do to every single victory we made. There's a reason why figures like Rosa Luxemburg has compared it to like the plight of Sisyphus. You're rolling a boulder up a hill only to have it roll back down on you. But at the same time, a lot of people are just fighting day to day for a little bit of dignity, for healthcare, for the first time, or for healthcare that doesn't cost a $6,000 deductible to even use, and whatever else. And we can't separate ourselves from those day-to-day, less abstract battles. So that was basically the core politics of myself, is core politics of Jacobin now. But back then, within the left, a lot of these ideas were a minority. It was a left that was very much, to put it in a broad strokes, critical of organizations, critical of party building, that saw no prospects whatsoever for any sort of electoral action. That's why I give so much credit, by the way, to people like Sama Swat and Socialist Alternative and people like that who were actually running these small races back when they weren't getting a lot of traction, and kind of fighting for that breakthrough. And for me, the goal was twofold. One was to make these interventions on the left, to get us to go back to some of our materialist roots, to say that, okay, we believe in struggles against oppression, but let's bring it into a class framework. Let's bring it into a broader connected movement so we could actually start to build majorities. Because we know that even though we want to leave no one behind in our movement, we need to build on the most broad, most common kind of basis. And that means leaving no one behind in both ways, either not leaving behind oppressed groups by not ignoring them in our program, but also making sure that everybody feels welcome, no matter if you're a straight white male earning 60 grand a year, join in, whatever else, just kind of ecumenical spirit. But I think what we have actually done really well was to communicate these ideas, these often very fringe ideas and debates, in a way that's accessible. So I think every Jacobin article at best should challenge readers a little bit. It might not be the easiest read. It's definitely not USA Today, but also it doesn't make people feel like they need a lot of prerequisites to get in. Like in the same way that to read an article in The Economist, you don't have to have read Adam Smith, though, sure, you should read Adam Smith. But in the same way, to get into a debate in Jacobin and feel like you have access to it, you shouldn't have to read Karl Marx or any of these other thinkers. And I think that's our reason for being. And then other than that, it was a lot of luck, a lot of great, talented contributions. Our design is awesome. That's all Ramike Forbes, our designer, not me. We have a lot of very talented people. Megan Day, you mentioned earlier in your intro. Yeah, a lot of it's been luck in the moment, and it's hard to separate the two, right? It's hard to say, okay, where would you have been if not for Occupy, and if not for the changes that it made in all of our politics and our perspectives about what was possible. But obviously, at a subjective level, right, it takes a lot of work and a lot of efforts by a lot of different people. But we've been blessed by new movements. We've been blessed by the two Bernie Sanders campaigns, which I know looking back, we could say they were failures, but on the spectrum of success and failure, we definitely at least hit 90th percentile, right, in terms of outcomes. Anyway, that's been the last decade.
And that's actually a fair point, because there's so much I want to ask you. But when you launched, this was 2010. Occupy was brewing, and it blew up overnight, right? And this is in the first, for our younger viewers, I hope you know this, but it was the first years of Obama, and coming out of an extremely unpopular president who's now like a resistance hero, George W. Bush. So there was this appetite for change, and I think what was really interesting about the growth of Jacobin and Occupy was how quickly people realized there was this moment, and we're not going to let Obama take it away. I mean, I think a lot of Democrats did that and just trusted him, and then as a result, he didn't deliver on so much. But from day one, the movement was very smart about putting forward action and pressure that built into something much, much, much bigger. And I don't know. I mean, I think it's interesting. So 2010, Occupy's brewing. How did you build from that? I mean, how did you? This is like early social media still. 4-5 years into Facebook. I mean, how are you able to grow this magazine at a time when also media companies were collapsing across the country, and you decided to they're cutting print, and you were like, oh, we're going to go print.
Well, I think to be honest, one thing that we could say was definitely in our favor was just our small scale. Like, it didn't take a lot to begin with, and we were filling a big void because there wasn't a lot out there advocating alternative views to the left of the mainstream. Like, I don't mean this to denigrate him, but I remember when I was starting Jacobin, Chris Hayes was like the leftmost figure. Like, he was writing for The Nation. I think he was their Washington correspondent. Then he got a show on MSNBC, and he was like the leftmost fringe of politics. Like, even Ezra Klein was like American Prospect.
Oh,
he
God.
was center left. And again, like, I actually think these are very reasonable, interesting thinkers, and probably net positives. Like, definitely net positive if you consider how like messed up American politics is, right? There was really no visible left. And I think a lot of what we were engaged in on the left was like a legacy project. When I was first politicized into DSA, a lot of these DSA meetings would be people over the age of 55, 60, right? And they'd be very excited to see a couple folks under the age of 20, and very nurturing, very friendly. It was a good environment. They were quite sectarian sometimes and hated each other because of personal grudges from 20, 30 years ago, but they would never kind of spill that over to how they treated the younger activists. I think that we had a milieu, we had a message that was distinct, and also, in a way, print really helped. So it was at a time when lots of blogs were proliferating, lots of online magazines, and the barrier to entry for those are so low that no one really stopped and paid attention. Like, you spoke to your audience, and they would eventually fizzle out, because even though Jacobin certainly grew very slowly at first and didn't have enough money to survive for many, many years, at the very least, we had some resources coming in from having a print physical product that people would see, and also just the legitimacy that conferred, especially older writers. They wanted to write for a print publication, not for an online publication, whatever else. So I think that really worked to our advantage. But fundamentally, it's a quarterly magazine, so it's niche publishing. And now that we're growing, we're finally, for the first time, able to invest in more original investigative journalism.
Right.
Obviously, Nano and Anna and our late friend Michael Brooks helped us start up this this YouTube channel, so we're able to do some video now. But
Weekends.
So we the weekend show, and then various other things we're doing on YouTube now. But obviously that's very difficult, and you need a combination of expertise and friendly people willing to do a lot of work for way below market rates for this specialized work.
Yeah.
And we're now just experimenting with these other things. But one thing I do keep in mind is it's almost as if I was much more pleased when we hit 10,000 subscribers because we were a successful small magazine. Now we're at 62,000 or so subscribers, which is great, but we are way smaller than larger publications than us, and also way bigger than the really successful small publications. So I feel like now we're in this intermediary period where we need to figure out a way to definitely grow and just continue to root ourselves in working class communities and people, but in a way that's not condescending. It's not a matter of dumbing it down or whatever else. I think it is a matter, though, of providing something distinct and different, because we can't just see that to the right. And that's one thing I'm really worried about in a Biden first term, because people are going to be really afraid of going back to Trump or something like Trump. But ironically, if we aren't an immediate opposition force to a Biden administration, then we're ceding that ground just to the populist right. And that's a difficult thing to navigate, because how do you be an opposition movement, but also be respectful of the millions of working class and poor people, especially people of color, who would have made a Biden victory possible if he's able to pull it off. So there's all these kind of dilemmas that and in general, this applies to all left of center media, will have to navigate. But the goal is obviously to continue to root ourselves more deeply in something real, be it a movement, be it a social base of people, and not just be this free floating, unaccountable, thing.
So what I love about Jacobin is strategic. It's thoughtful. There's a diversity of opinion that probably many didn't even realize existed on the left, and I in particular love the historic flashbacks to learn from, just we've been here before, et cetera. So you, as at this moment, right, having some sort of editorial, I think I'm feeling like there's a lot of folks who are losing their grasp. Not everybody, but some folks feel defeated. They want to, stay out of the movement. They may find it easier just to go work for the centrists, or, for lack of a better term, sell out. And you've done some pieces recently that I think are really smart. The perfect example, whether or not he was really in the movement to begin with, is the piece on Sean McElwee. If you haven't seen that, go check that out, because, I think this is my editorial. I think he's essentially a weapon of neoliberals and maybe even some progressive organizations to control who is able to be elected and not on the left, saying in a very basic way. So as an editor, how are you able to kind of sift through what's real and what's not? And in this very sensitive moment, especially reflecting back on history and seeing how many moments there have been like this?
Well, I think having an overall framework, an ideological framework and an intellectual framework really, really helps. So in other words, in our bones, I feel like we are fairly dogmatically Marxists, right? And the difference between us and other fairly dogmatic Marxists is that we're not, we tend to be pretty flexible. Some might say opportunists, but I would say flexible or tactically savvy about how we communicate ideas and how we win people over. There's a great Joan Robinson quote that I love, which is that she was talking to a friend who was a much more orthodox Marxist, but of course she was kind of a heterodox economist who drew a lot on Marx. She said, the difference between me and you is that I have Marx in my bones, you have Marx in your mouth. And I think that's a lot of what Jacobin does. And that helps, I think, figure out, be able to plug in where things are coming from and see what ideas are serving the interests of capital and what ideas are broadly serving the interests of working class people, or at least explaining something at a materialist level. And that allows us to be pretty flexible in who we publish as individuals on certain issues. So there are certain liberals who don't share our framework or our goals, and we're happy to publish on issues like student debt or Medicare for all. Like, I'm for the decommodification of like all the economy. You're for the decommodification of this portion of the economy. That's fine. Let's talk about that. Or occasionally we publish historians or other thinkers, philosophers, or whatnot, who present a very compelling materialist analysis, but might not necessarily be Marxist or share our political commitments. Like, if somebody wants to explain, here are some of the economic and social roots of mass incarceration, even if they don't share our conclusions, that's someone we would love to have. We would love to have a conversation about the roots of the Civil War, the roots of the American Revolution, and have these debates and back and forth. So I think the real hard line that we have to draw is who's like a reactionary, like who we want to no platform. And I think there's a lot of both, of course, the obvious ones like fascists, but also in general, there are right populists. Maybe we don't want to engage with intellectually, but there are other people who we could actually gain something by engaging with. And it has to be a judgment call. I mean, there's actually some right populists that I'm happy to have a debate with or something like that. There's others that I wouldn't, and you draw the line at like, reactionary views on gender or race that are basically like anti-enlightenment, right? Do you actually want to have we have to be strategic, in other words, and who we're engaging with, and we try to do that, but obviously it's a fine line. There's a lot of contributors. There's no exact party line, which I think is good. It would be it's a relief that there isn't one, because if there was, then it would just be a constant, very sectarian, or this person's in, this person's not in, or whatever else. But there is a box, and I think the box is pretty big, but there is a box. It does exist, and that's just something you figure out over time. And I'm sure you have the same dilemmas when it comes to all right, what guests are interesting that I want to book? How will the audience respond to them? Because you want to both challenge people and you want to present new viewpoints, and you also want to maintain the cohesion and kind of good feelings of a movement. And that's a trick. I'm kind of not sure what the answer is exactly, because we don't want to be an echo chamber, but we also want to build this cohesion. And it's a very fine line.
So that leads great into my next question, which is when growing, I mean, Jacobin has built up, it's blowing up essentially, but how are you able to spill these messages out there into a community that is not as educated, is not as online, is not as well read, rural communities, working class communities? I mean, have you seen Jacobin make a difference? Has it been able to go ahead?
Yeah. Well, I think that over the last couple of years, we've just seen from reader surveys and other things that our audience has gotten more diverse and more working class, using certain things we ask, like education for a proxies class, which isn't one-to-one, but it's the best we often have, but just by virtue of it getting bigger. So in other words, America is such a large country that you could reach 2 million people online every single month, and around 60% of our audience is in the US. So 60% of 2 million is, I should know that, 1.2 million.
Yeah.
And obviously you're still reaching tens of thousands of more working class people than any other, similar left venue, but you still don't have a social base. So what I'm wary of is often fool's gold. And this is my one hesitancy or thing that I tell DSA members is let's look historically at the new left and other explosions of the far left. And often it feels like if you're in a group of 10 people and becomes a group of 10,000 people, even the Maoist movement in places like Germany became in the new left era, it feels like you're growing by leaps and bounds. So that means next year or the year after, you're going to have 100,000.
That's right.
Then 1 million, then 10 million, then 20 million. And I think it leads to a kind of insularity and just comfort, complacency, and also just in general leads towards sectarianism. So in other words, I don't know the answer to that. I do know that by having some Branko Marcetic, one of our reporters, is I know that his material tends to reach a newer audience and different audience than some of our other writers. I think it's because he does a lot of original investigative work, and he has like a slightly less like maybe rote framework than I do, right? So, and I mean, I don't, like, I imagine that's good in some ways, bad in other ways, right? Depends on the type of piece or whatnot. But I think that's an example of, okay, doing a little bit more investigative journalism can open up new audiences. On the other hand, hosting debates, like we have hosted like a really big debate with the editors of Reason about 2 years ago. And I still get emails about the debate. Oh, that convinced me, that changed my mind or whatever. And that's a good example of someone who, I disagree very vehemently with the editors of Reason about a lot of things. I think they're actually responsible in some small part for a lot of really bad policies that are grinding down millions of Americans. But on the other hand, you know, they're non-authoritarians, at least besides for the workplace. They're total authoritarians there. But I don't mean their personal workplace. I don't know about that. I just mean like labor capital relations. But in other words, like that's an example of like an engagement with people. Slavoj Žižek, I have a lot of disagreements with, but he had the debate with Jordan Peterson. He won over a lot of people. He presented his ideas out there. So I think we need to figure out a way to continue to do public engagement, to continue to, like, say, have our journalists and other people go in places like NPR and engage in, yes, polite, civilized, you know, discussions. Like, and I think this is my one pushback for what's also a large part of, you know, part of my audience, at least, like the kind of more like irony-laden part of the left. I totally get where that's coming from. But in fact, historically, let's say in the 1930s, like we had all sorts of crazy ideas as far as our program when it came to the left, right? But we were able to present a veneer of respectability because it helped us in our mass organizations and it helped us accomplish our political goals. The irony now is that actually there's nothing to hide. We have no association with the Soviet Union on the contemporary U.S. left like our old communists did in the 1930s. We are fighting for a really popular program that people tend to agree with, everything from Green New Deal, which is close to majority support, to Medicare for All, which is outright majority support. And I think within the next decade, we'll have very clear and outright majority support, even among Republicans. So we have a really popular program. And we're masking this popular mass program that already has support in sometimes very fringe and alienating rhetoric. Whereas, in fact, like regular working class Americans, I think, want to see like fairly polished and professional and serious people making the case for these programs. And it's difficult, I think, sometimes in our generation because we didn't have that media training. We don't come from those backgrounds. I think that's one reason why we're actually committed to these sorts of policies, and we didn't already join the GNC or something like that. And also because like it is like it's a subcultures develop and they're not always a bad thing. Like that's part of building our unity and ties together as a community. Like it's fine for there to be in-jokes among the socialist left and things like that, memes and whatever. Like that's part of building group cohesion. But I think going forward, like I really want to see Jacobin breaking stories and maintaining our media footprint and maintaining this dialogue with mainstream liberalism, especially so that they know that we're out there as a poll. And also viewers know that, like, listen, if you watch Joe Biden and you're like, I don't really like this guy. You know, we want to speak to that, but from the left. So we're not just giving that space to the populist
exactly.
right.
That's exactly it. If you're not in that space intentionally, and you know, I was watching right before our show. I was watching Bernie Sanders on The View, which you know, the Twitter was furious about today. Why does he go on The View? They hate him because it's the largest audience. Why would he not go on The View?
Yeah, or Fox Town Hall. Like I know you were on this line too, but it's just so common sense. Like, did anyone watch that Town Hall? He killed it. And like he's speaking to an audience that actually like is for his program, even if they watch Fox. You know, it's kind of common sense in every other political context. But in the U.S., I think somehow we become very moralistic about these things, I think.
Yes. In a way that, I mean, I remember when Barack Obama said he wasn't going to go on Fox News anymore. And it's like, You're not going to fund the DNC. You're not going to fund Organize. You're not going to go on Fox News. Who are you talking to? Like, what is the point? Bhaskar Sunkara, I wish we had more time to talk about the future of Jacobin, so hopefully you can come back on and we'll talk a little bit more about those investigative pieces, and we'll help amplify them however we can, because you're doing brilliant work, and it's been very thoughtful organizing, and we appreciate you.
That's great, and I really have loved everything on your channel, and I appreciate all your work you're doing as well, and your support for Jacobin, and for just in general this growing kind of shared project we have on the left. But thanks, everyone.
Thanks for watching and listening to The Nomiki Show. But remember to click like and subscribe on YouTube, and please share on social media. If you're not already a patron, please join us for as low as $5 a month on patreon.com/The Nomiki Show for early and special content. That investment makes a huge difference. We are not corporate media raking in the dough. It's really you guys that are keeping us going. So please consider being a patron. And to our current patrons, thank you so much. We are incredibly grateful to you. We also now have swag. So check us out on thenomikishow.com to get your mugs, your totes, and your stickers.